You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. What's the vibe like in up there at CMU right now for an opportunity to come down and play LSU in Baton Rouge?
Well, they're certainly aware of how daunting it can be to come down to Baton Rouge and try to win a football game, but that's exactly what they're trying to do. You know, Jim McElwain's the coach who's come down and won a game in Death Valley, and even though Central Michigan is considered, maybe nothing more than a Mid-American Conference directional Michigan school, they're coming down to win a football game.
What's the opinion there of Jim McElwain among the fan base at Central Michigan?
They really like him. What he was able to do in his first year when he came in with that MAC West Division title, the year before they won 11, and he comes in with essentially the same cast of characters and, wins the MAC. Comes a game short of winning the MAC championship game. So the fans are very optimistic, kind of a down year last year, but, he sent the whole freshman class or almost the whole freshman class home when they initially canceled the season within the Mid-American Conference last year. So kind of last year's disregarded as kind of an anomaly, and how they performed against Missouri and then coming home and pitching a shutout against Robert Morris has really revived the optimism within the program.
Let's talk a little bit about what we've seen through two games. We'll start with that game in Columbia against Missouri. Obviously, a road game against an SEC opponent. What did we learn about Central Michigan when they went toe-to-toe with an SEC school, both good and bad?
Well, the good, I think you really learned how well this team could run the football. Lou Nichols has kind of taken on the load as that ball carrier, that bell cow back after Kobe Lewis went down for the season with a knee injury, and he was really impressive that first game against Missouri. I believe it was 139 yards. Don't have the stats in front of me, but they showed that they can run the ball with anybody, and I think that's the one thing they want to do going down to Death Valley. The quarterback position, Jacob Sermon's been solid, made a couple of mistakes against Missouri, and that kind of hurt him, but he's better than what they had last year. And, so that's one of the things that they're really looking forward to is how does he perform against a team like LSU? Because, you can say what you want, but that's definitely a step up from Missouri. And on the bad side of things, I think the secondary kind of got a little bit exposed. Again, there's a lot of youth at that position, a lot of unproven talent at that position. In the past game, Connor Bazelak had the big pass to open the game. Kind of caught the Chippewas off guard. So I'll say the pass coverage, a lot of experience at safety, but not so much at corner. And I think that's the one main area of concern is how can this cornerback room, how can that group hang with receivers like Keishawn Butte and people like that?
Where LSU's kind of struggled, Christian, has been at the line of scrimmage. It's been a big talking point here about how the offensive line struggled. So what about that Central Michigan defensive front seven? How are they at stopping the run and pressuring the quarterback?
Well, I think that's an area they feel really good about. To be completely honest, at the defensive end position, you've got three really solid players. Troy Hairston, I listened to Coach Ogeron's press conference. He said that he plays with his hair on fire. And I think that's a very good way of describing Troy Hairston. Again, not going to blow you away with his measurables. He stands about 5'10", but he does play like his hair's on fire, and he's the reigning MAC Player of the Year on defense. At linebacker, you've got Troy Brown, who's two-time first-team All-MAC. He's a guy who's always going to be in the running for that MAC Defensive Player of the Year. Converted safety who has really good ball skills and coverage, and then can bring the heat when the Chippewas dial up those blitzes as well. What's kind of that question mark is kind of on the defensive line and the interior with the defensive tackles. They feel really good about Tico Brown, who had a good year last year. Jaquez Bristol's now in his third year with the program. Still just a red shirt freshman by eligibility standards, but a lot of good things to say about Jaquez as well. But after that, it kind of gets a little bit murky because Robbie Stewart, who's been that mainstay, he's done for the year this year. He suffered an injury in fall camp. And there's not a ton of depth. Jason Williams is a freshman. And outside of those guys, it's just a lot of unproven talent. So how can the Chippewas hang in there on that defensive interior, the three techniques and the one technique? That's going to be something that's really interesting to follow.
Christian Booher is our guest, Central Michigan beat reporter there for Central Michigan Life. Let me flip the line of scrimmage because And I didn't get to watch much of the Missouri game against Central Michigan, but I did see the box score where the Chippewas allowed 9 sacks and 14 tackles for loss. I mean, it looked like, looking at the box score, that was a gigantic mismatch. Is that reality how that played out, and is that a gigantic concern this week coming to Baton Rouge?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. Missouri has that defensive coordinator, Steve Wilkes, and he threw a lot of unique looks at that Central Michigan offensive line, and they played together last year, but that's still a group that's relatively young, and you don't see the blitzes like the blitzes that Missouri was dialing up in the Mid-American Conference. So for guys like Deontay Powell-Woods, who's in his third year, but again, didn't play a ton as a freshman and only got 6 games last year. Jamez Kimbrough, who's in his second year starting as center, but again, he didn't play any Power 5 teams or anybody outside the conference last year. And then, the best player, the guy everybody's talking about on that offensive line for CMU is Bernard Raymond, their left tackle, who, again, is a converted tight end and is in just his second year playing the position, and the first year was just the 6 games. That I think Bernard Raymond is a guy that the LSU fans are going to want to take note of because he's a legit people mover. He moves people around as that left tackle. Very good instincts, very good athleticism for a guy who plays left tackle. And I expect him to be a guy that kind of rises up draft boards. I mean, fans know it. Eric Fisher's a guy, Joe Staley, another CMU guy. Both of them went on to have really good careers. Fisher's still going with the Colts now. I think Raymond's kind of that next guy in line. But to answer your question in kind of a roundabout way, I do think it was a little bit of both. I think there was a little bit of a mismatch. Trajan Jeffcoat's a tough guy for anybody to block, and he was in the backfield quite a bit in that game. But at the end of the day, I expect this offensive line to be ready for the opportunity. I think it remains to be seen, and I believe I saw that LSU is going to be without one of their top pass rushers, Ali Gay, and I think that certainly helps Central's cause. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to learn a lot about just how good this offensive line is because, people are talking about Raymond and people are talking about Powell-Woods and Kimbrough and those guys and even the right tackle Luke Gadecki as well. But I guess that 9 sacks certainly a hefty responsibility falls on the offensive line, but there was also some looks that they hadn't seen, and I'm not sure they were super prepared for those. And so I think it was a little bit of both.
And a couple more things. No one ever talks about special teams, but sometimes those do create ebbs and flows in the game. How's Central Michigan on special teams?
Well, they've got 2 really young kicker and punter. Marshall Meter is one of the 2020 guys who actually stayed on campus and had an exceptional year kicking the football. He was 8 for 8 last year, had a long of 53 which for a true freshman who's in Mount Pleasant, kicking at CMU, that's borderline unheard of. But he had a really good year. And then Luke Elzinga, the punter, a redshirt freshman, he's in his 3rd year now, but didn't play at all in 2019, and then last year started all the games. And the first punt of his career, he uncorks a 74-yarder. So there are 2 guys there. They feel really good about them. Haven't really seen them as much in the return game. They're going to send back true freshman Marion Lukes and Darius Braithia, a junior running back, to return the kicks. Haven't really seen them make too many plays. Obviously, Robert Morris, there was a shutout. So, I mean, aside from the halftime kickoff, you didn't see them at all. And then Missouri, a lot of touchbacks. So you didn't see that. Khalil Pimpleton, their big offensive playmaker, is going to take the punt. And he's a guy who's a problem for opponents. You don't want to give him room to run. So it'll be important for LSU to find ways to neutralize him in the return game because although he's about 5'8", 5'9", he can run with the best of them. So they feel good about that. And then the place kicker, the kickoff guy is Josh Rolston. He's a true freshman, and he's already pretty much doubled their touchback total from last year. They had just 3 touchbacks last year, and he's already got 4 this year. So that's another guy they feel good about.
Before you go, I know you said as we started that Central Michigan's coming to Baton Rouge to win a football game. Is that a realistic expectation? And if so, what's the blueprint there for Jim McElwain if they are going to come into Baton Rouge pull an upset?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I do think within the program that's the standard, that's the reasonable standard, and I think that's part of what Coach McElwain brought with him when he came to Mount Pleasant, because a lot of people were surprised that a guy who coached at Florida and was coach of the year at Colorado State would come to Mount Pleasant and coach the football team, especially after the program was 1-11 the year before. And so I think that when he came to Mount Pleasant and right away took the team to the MAC championship game, that raised some eyebrows around here. And now I think that the fan base and the players, they all believe. And so I certainly think that it's reasonable for them to go in there and think they can win this game. And you pair that with LSU, who's been kind of up and down, and it just kind of looks like, this is a team that's kind of ripe for the picking. And, Central Michigan's got an experienced core of guys, and they are. I do think that it's reasonable for them to think that. And then as far as the blueprint goes, I think it starts with running the football. They've got 5 guys in that running back room who they feel really good about. I mentioned Nichols, I mentioned Bracey, Marion Luke, and then a couple other freshmen, Miles Bailey and DJ Stepney. Stepney, part of that 2021 recruiting class. They feel good about all those guys, and they've got the depth, and I'm sure that fans will see all 5 of them get at least 1 or 2 carries. And so for them to go in there and win, it's going to start with the run game, and it's going to start with those big boys up front, guys like Raymond, guys like Kimbrough. So that's kind of the blueprint, really. I mean, obviously you want to get guys like Ja'Cory Sullivan and Khalil Pimpleton involved out wide in the pass game, but at the same time, I mean, look at that LSU secondary. I mean, Derek Stingley, you got to know where he's at all times, and you'd like to keep the ball in his direction. So for Central Michigan to go in there and win this game, they're going to have to run the ball.
He is Christian Booher, Central Michigan Life, beat writer covering the Chippewas, on Twitter at @cbooher_. Man, good stuff. We appreciate some time. Enjoy the game on Saturday, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.